There's something about the first day of school that sticks with you. The crisp smell of new paper, the squeak of sneakers on polished hallways, the way your backpack felt just a little too heavy. For baby boomers, those memories aren't just about lessons or recess. They're wrapped up in the simple things we use every day, things that don't exist in classrooms anymore. Back then, school supplies weren't flashy. They were sturdy. They were practical. And sometimes they were kind of magical in their own quiet way. Today, we're looking at 10 retro school supplies that boomers actually miss. The tools of learning that shaped a generation. Pull up a wooden desk. And let's take a trip back to the classroom of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. The smell of liquid paper. Ah, liquid paper. That little bottle with the tiny brush inside. You'd unscrew the cap, dip in, and paint over your mistakes like a tiny artist fixing a flaw in a masterpiece. It wasn't just correction fluid. It was hope in a bottle. One stroke, and your spelling test looked perfect again. Invented in the 1950s by a secretary named Bette Nesmith Graham. Yes, Mama Monkey Michael Nesmith. Liquid paper became a classroom staple by the 60s. Kids loved the smell, sharp, chemical, almost sweet. Some even sniffed it just to feel focused. Don't try that today. But as electric typewriters gave way to computers and whiteout tape replaced bottles, liquid paper faded. Now, a single typo disappears with Control+Z. Fast, clean, but kind of soulless. Boomers miss that ritual. The pause, the careful brushstroke, the satisfaction of a clean fix. It wasn't just fixing a mistake. It was starting over. The wooden desk with a flip top. You didn't just sit at a desk. You owned it. And if you were lucky, yours had a hinge lid that flipped up, revealing a dark little cave perfect for stashing contraband. Comic books, trading cards, half-eaten apples. These wooden desks were built to last. Solid oak, iron legs, and a surface worn smooth by generations of elbows and daydreams. Teachers would sometimes let you carve your name into the wood. Proof you were there. They started in the late 1800s and ruled classrooms well into the 1970s. But schools began replacing them with lighter, cheaper metal desks. Easier to clean, easier to move, but not half as personal. Now, when boomers see a photo of one of those old desks, they don't just see furniture. They see their fifth grade self, hiding a note under the lid, praying the teacher wouldn't catch them. The Mimeograph Machine. Before Xerox, there was a mimeograph. That clunky machine in the teacher's lounge that churned out worksheets smelling like purple ink and summer rain. If you were in school before the 80s, you know that smell. Teachers would type a master sheet, wrap it around a drum, and feed paper through. The result? Copies with slightly smudged letters, always in that signature purple. Sometimes, if you press your nose to the page right after it came out, you'd get a little dizzy from the fumes. Kids would race to be first in line, not for the math problems, but for that fresh, inky scent. The mimeograph faded when photocopiers became affordable, cleaner, faster, but they don't leave a smell behind. And for many, that purple scent was the smell of learning. Chalkboards in the box of Sidewalk chalk. Chalkboards weren't just for teachers. Remember when you got to write your name in cursive up front? Or draw a map of the United States with wobbly borders? The sound of chalk on slate, scritch-scratch, was the soundtrack of school. And the box of Sidewalk chalk in the art corner? That was freedom. Teachers would let you go outside and draw hopscotch grids or rainbow murals on the blacktop. No rules. No rubrics. Just chalk, dust on your hands and sun on your face. Green, pink, yellow, white. Those stubby sticks wore down fast. But they were bright, bold, and temporary. Like childhood. Whiteboards came in the 80s and 90s. Neater. Less dust. But they don't squeak. They don't crumble. And you can't rub them out with your sleeve when you mess up. Boomers missed the mess. Because the mess meant you were trying. The metal pencil box. Not a plastic case. Not a fabric pouch. A real metal pencil box. Shiny, rectangular. With your name painted or stickered on top. Inside, a ruler, a pink eraser, 3 number 2 pencils, and maybe a tiny sharpener that screwed onto the end. You'd shake it, and it would rattle like a maraca. These boxes were treasures. Some had pictures. Space rockets, ballerinas, dolphins. Others were plain silver, but just as proud. They clinked when you walked. They dented if you dropped them, but they lasted. And when you opened it, it felt like opening a toolbox for your brain. Plastic took over because it was cheaper, but it doesn't ring the same. It doesn't feel important. For boomers, that little metal box was their first office supply, and it mattered. The Ditto machine's purple pages. Even before mimeographs, there was the Ditto machine, also known as a spirit duplicator. And if you went to school in the 50s or early 60s, you know exactly what we're talking about. Teachers would write on a special wax paper sheet with a stylus. Then the machine would print copies using a solvent, usually alcohol-based. And every page came out with that unmistakable purple ink and a damp, almost fruity smell. Kids would lick the pages just to taste it. Again, not recommended. But that smell? It was the scent of a pop quiz, a spelling list, or a class poem. Ditto sheets were fragile. The ink smudged if you touched it, but they felt special, like secret messages from the teacher. By the 1980s, they vanished, replaced by cleaner, faster copiers. But no modern machine makes you remember the way a worksheet smelled. The slide rule. Long before calculators, there was the slide rule, a wooden or plastic ruler with sliding parts and mysterious markings. It looked like something an astronaut would use. And in a way, it was. High school science and math students carried them like badges of honor. You'd line up the scales, slide the center strip, and voila, solve logarithms, square roots, trig functions. It wasn't easy. It took practice. But when you got it right, it felt like magic. Invented in the 1600s, the slide rule peaked in the mid-20th century. Engineers, pilots, even NASA used them during the space race. But by the 1970s, electronic calculators made them obsolete, faster, more accurate. But they didn't require skill. You didn't have to think with your hands. Boomers who use slide rules don't just miss the tool. They miss the feeling of solving something with nothing but your mind and a sliding piece of plastic. The bell-top desk chair, not a plastic bucket chair, not a cushioned seat, a real school chair, wooden seat, metal legs, and a curved back with a hole in the middle. And if you were lucky, it had a little bell on the bottom. That's right. Some desks had a small metal bell attached. Press down with your knee and ding. It was supposed to get the teacher's attention. But mostly, kids use it to annoy each other. Imagine a classroom full of 30 of those. One kid rings it, then another. Soon, the whole room is a symphony of dings. Teachers eventually remove them, of course. Too distracting. But for a brief, glorious moment, every student had a tiny instrument of chaos under their desk. Now, chairs are silent. Efficient, but a little too quiet. The hand-crank pencil sharpener. Wall-mounted. Metal, with a handle you turn by hand. You'd stick your pencil into the hole, grip the handle, and crank. Clink, 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 until the point was sharp enough to write the alphabet in cursive. It wasn't fast. Sometimes the pencil would break. Sometimes the shavings would spill on the floor. But there was something satisfying about the motion, the rhythm. The tiny pile would dust at your feet. Electric sharpeners came later. Automatic, quiet, efficient. But they don't give you that tactile feedback, that sense of making something sharp with your own hands. And let's be honest, half the fun was cranking it too hard and sending pencil shavings flying across the room. The composition notebook. Spiral notebooks are everywhere now. But back then, it was all about the composition notebook. Maroon cover, stitch binding, lined paper that didn't tear when you erased, and that front page where you wrote your name, grade, and subject in careful block letters. These notebooks were tough. They survived backpacks, rainstorms, and being stuffed under gym mats. And when you filled one up, you'd start another just like it. Teachers loved them because they stayed closed. No loose papers floating around. Now, most kids use digital notes or flimsy spirals that fall apart by October. But boomers remember the weight of a full composition book, the neat rows of handwriting, the pride in a clean page. It wasn't just paper. It was a record of your thoughts. These supplies weren't just tools. They were part of the rhythm of school. The smell of chalk, the clink of a metal pencil box, the ding of a desk bell. Small things that made big memories. Maybe today's classrooms are more efficient, but they're not always more human. So if you remember the purple smell of a Ditto sheet or the weight of a wooden desk, we'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below and tell us, what school supply do you miss the most? And if you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, give us a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and ring that bell. Because every week, we're opening another drawer from the past. Until next time, keep your pencils sharp and your memories sharper.